good evening, everybody, and welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight, episode 154, and the topic for tonight is non-camping activities. And this is something you came up with there, Ben, and I really liked the idea. So for me, just other activities to get you out there in the woods, and maybe give you some ideas, talk about some of the experience that we've had in doing some other activities, and, just a good open general discussion, I think. And hope we'll learn a little bit off each other on this one, too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and the point of this obviously is, we spend a lot of time talking about the camping, the sleep systems, the backpacks, setting up fire, like all the stuff that really seems to lead to the one thing, which is spending the night out. But there's a ton of other things that get you out there, get you doing stuff that we can cover. So, the real thing is, where do you want to start?
Well, I think just shotgunning it. Some real common activities out there, and we'll talk a little bit on each one, and we'll just go with the flow. And as always, anybody that has something to add in, by all means, please reach us in the comments there. So for me, the first thing that came to mind, and I said it to you the second that you said other activities, is something that I really used to like. And one of the things that I started with Mel before we started doing bushcraft together was geocaching. And it's kind of one of those ones that even your kids can enjoy it because it has that, for different reasons, but it has that that technology niche to it, which a lot of today's kids and stuff, they're always looking for something that's kind of tech related. You know what I mean? They don't want to just do the outside and smell the bushes. They actually want to hold something in their hand that does something and have that, the whirls and pings and bright colors and all that stuff. And you can get that because your cell phone can double as a GPS, or you can get a standalone GPS, and that gives you that technology side of things for those that really want that.
Yeah, and likewise, we did a fair bit of geocaching. We pick it up, we drop it, we pick it up fairly frequently, and it's a really fun thing because it's a treasure hunt. Our girls really enjoy it, and honestly, they do something similar when they're playing themselves. They'll hide things and get each other to find it. The beauty with the geocache is someone else has already done the lion's share of the work. All you have to do is find it, you write your name in, and close it back up, put it back like you found it, and there's more to do it. And there's a shocking amount of geocaches throughout, the world. Like, they're everywhere. And there's so many things you can do. You have the tracking bugs. There's a mail system you can use with it. There are the puzzle ones where you find one, it kind of gives you a clue to the next one, and so forth. Like, it's all in what you want to put into it, really. Like, there's so much you can do, and it's a great hobby. And it teaches a lot of skills too. Like, it teaches you how to use your GPS, teaches you how to put in coordinates, how to go from point to point. You're having fun, but you're learning so much about navigation, finding things, just keeping your eyes sharp for finding it, what doesn't quite fit, what's a little bit off. Because people get pretty clever with these things, so you end up finding things that are well hidden and disguised. So the skills you pick up off of it is almost immeasurable. So.
And I couldn't agree more. Just to take a small step back, for anybody that's wondering, if you haven't heard of geocaching, it's literally like a world-sized game of hide and seek. You can go to geocaching.com and a few other websites. They'll give you coordinates to people that have hidden items or geocaches throughout the landscape and stuff like that. You punch the coordinates into your GPS, and it'll bring you to the location. It gets you, as accurate as your GPS is going to be, and as accurate as their GPS was, because they mark it. So you're relying on their GPS to be whatever accuracy that has, and then your GPS to find that spot they mark. So you usually get within, like 20 feet of it. That's a fair number. It's about 20 feet by throwing the coordinates in. But then there's usually, as Ben said, like little puzzles and things like that, because they don't make these things easy to see. It's not like you arrive at the coordinates and there's a box there that has big letters on it that says geocache right here. Like, that's not the idea. The idea for a lot of people is you hide these things in plain sight, and nobody really finds them unless they were meant to find them. So one that sticks out in mind for me that got us into geocaching, we kind of found it by accident. We used to live in Westville, if anybody knows the area, and there's a park there called Acadia Park. And this was what's considered a micro geocache, I think is the term. Like, it's absolutely insanely tiny. It was the size of literally like a pen cap. No, it's even smaller than that. Like, it was tiny. Like, we're talking like the tip of my finger big. But anyway, it was this black little capsule, and they'd stuck it over a screw head where some of these other things had come out, and it really blended in. And to be fair, we were goofing around down at the park. I can't remember what we were doing. I think Mel was on lunch. We were just out for a walk. We just, killing time more than anything. And I can't remember what, but I brushed my hand over where this was and I knocked it off. And I'm like, holy crap, I broke something in the park. And I picked it up and I'm like, this don't look right. You know what I mean? And open it up and there's just this like tiniest little ticker tape inside that said, congratulations, you found such and such a geocache. And then there's a spot where you're supposed to sign and date it. At the time, I didn't have a pencil, and being a microcache, there's nothing there to sign it. Anyway, I'm like, who would hide something like this? And I had a little thing at the bottom that said geocache.com. And I'm like, all right, I've heard of geocaching. Let's check this out. We threw it on. We seen that there was tons of these things just local to us. So I had a GPS. We threw some in, and we started geocaching there. And then later on, it became a reason to get out and explore new areas. Because I love getting out and seeing places. But much like a lot of our listeners, I assume, you kind of want a goal. You want a destination. You want a reason to get out there. Or even a little bit of motivation. You know what I mean? Just to say, oh, I'm going to go walk around the backwoods. That's all good and dandy. But you tend to wander. You just kind of, saunter through. You perhaps don't get as far as you wanted to and stuff like that. So if you have a destination or something in mind, it can really, I don't want to say force you, but it really encourages you to get out there and check out these places. And the nice thing is a lot of these geocaches are hidden in really nice locations. You get to see a lot of nice look-offs and things that other people don't see because other people were out there exploring them, said, hey, this is a neat location. Let's hide a geocache in this location, and then other people can come out and enjoy this. And that's where a lot of the stuff works into. And you get to see like waterfalls and caves and the park there, for instance, it just gives you a reason to get out there. And that's what I really liked about it.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely do get to see a lot of new things, and you end up places that you may never have gone before. A couple of things that we could mention is there is an app that you can put on your phone that makes it really easy. And most of them are free to search, but some of them are part of the paid, like if you register and you pay a premium, there's a bunch of other ones that open up, and some of those are kind of cool and unique. So that's something to keep in mind. It's still, regardless, a pretty cheap activity. So if you're looking for something to get you in the woods, keeps the kids interested, and get you places that you wouldn't go otherwise, it's a pretty good bargain, I think. We did pay the premium for quite a while, and we got away from it. And I think probably in the next little while we may look at getting it again. So it's something that's definitely a great thing. It gets you out there. It teaches you some bushcraft without you ever realizing it taught you. A good geocacher is basically a GPS expert. Like, they know how to use their GPS really well. It kind of forces that. And I remember when we first got into it, a lot of people kind of made fun of it. Now some of the people that make fun of it are some of the biggest geocachers I know.
And that's the thing. I remember when it first came around, and I still remember people saying, oh, that's that nerd activity. You know what I mean? Like, oh, yeah, you're going to get out there, you're going to play with the technology in the woods, you're bringing the nerd with you. And I'm like, well, no. GPSs were really starting to catch on at that point. We're not talking overly long ago, like early 2000s. And they were just kind of building their momentum. They had been out, but they've been becoming more publicly available, I guess, or personally available. The cost was coming down is what I'm trying to get at here, to where people could afford them. And geocaching really hit its bloom. Everybody ran out and got these things because they knew they could get you anywhere as long as you had the coordinates, but they didn't really have reasons to get out and use them. You know what I mean? They'd take them to their camp and they'd ping a mark, or they'd take them to their fishing hole and they'd ping a mark, and they only had a half a dozen locations in it. And a handful of them were trying to justify, and this is just a story that I've read about it, so please don't take this as the gospel. This is just the way I've put it together in my head. Anyway, some people were literally saying, well, another use of these is we could hide stuff. We could get other people out there to look at these, but we want to eliminate people that could potentially damage the area and stuff like that, or what they call as moguls or moguls on the
Muggles. Yeah.
Muggles, that's it, sorry, in the geocaching terms. And once you start researching it, you realize there is some jargon in there. But anyway, they wanted to keep the average Joe out of there. So they started hiding these things and camouflaging them and jamming them into like really weird and interesting locations. I actually found one underwater. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, literally the sky's the limit on these. I've seen them hidden as bottle caps that stick in the ground. So if you walk by, it just looks like a bottle cap laying on the ground. You pull it up, it's a little tube in it, and they got some stuff in there. Fake rocks, that was always a good one. The
Hollowed
little
out logs. Pill containers are a huge one, and they're usually camouflage tape, and trees under roots. We've seen a ton. Ammo cans were a bigger one for large ones. They come in all shapes and sizes. I think the largest I've seen is a 5-gallon bucket, and the smallest, like you said, is
oh, there's a perfect example. That's about how big it was. That's like the little clicky button on a pen. It was like tiny.
yeah.
But
So great activity, a lot of fun. It really does get people out there and doing things. Just trying to spin off of that, because we could talk about geocaching probably all day, me and you. Same thing, using a bit of technology to get you out there. Edible Wild. There's a ton of apps out there available that tell you how to identify plants, whether they be edible or not. Plant identification and trying to find a new plant can really get you going, because you look up where do they grow, what terrain, stuff, and then you start going looking for a specific plant and its environment. And that'll get you out there and doing things. And the cool thing is you're going to learn so much about plants, because to identify a plant, you need to know what it isn't. So you need to know all the names of the parts and how they work. And as you look at it, you say, okay, this plant has this, but this plant doesn't. So this can't be that plant. It's not that way. I don't pretend to be an expert. I have looked at it. So definitely a fun one to do. And one of the last trips I did, we did that. We downloaded the fungus one, and we went looking for different mushrooms and stuff. And it was a blast.
And much like you said, being another techie one, it's one that really holds the interest of the kids. And I don't just mean like your teenagers, which this one also kind of holds their attention to, but I mean younger kids. They love getting out there. There's some apps out there where you can take a picture of an item and it'll try and look for it. And they really seem to like that one. For the people that are a little bit more woods goer, you got to do a little bit more scanning. Like you are the camera. That's a little bit more accurate, because anything that takes a picture, there's some room for error there. And I would stress that, especially if you're using the fungus one or something like that, and it says, oh, it's probably good to eat. Don't push your luck unless you're really sure. Like, there's always a level of error in these. And I think the one you're talking about, it actually has a percentage of how sure it is.
Yeah.
And it's very rarely 100. You know what I mean?
But compare that with a few things. Like when I've done it, I've often taken a book with me too. So I have the book, I have the app, and then I look at what's in the area. So yeah, there may be 4 fungus that look similar to this, but only 1 or 2 of them even grow in North America. So you're like, okay, I can eliminate 3 of the ones that I'm worried about already, because I shouldn't find them here at all. And first of all, yeah, obviously don't eat things, but that's the step to getting there. And then from there, finding people who are knowledgeable, which gets you into one of the cool things is just meeting new people and learning things. Because as you build these hobbies, you're going to ask questions. And as you ask questions, you're going to meet people, and you're going to learn that people that maybe you didn't even realize were into this thing or are into this. So that's definitely another one of my favorites, though, is plant identification and fungus identification.
And even tree identification, it all kind of falls in there. Just
yeah.
Wilderness identification, be it like animals, learning tracks, plants, trees. It's all reasons to get out there. Like, I really used to like taking the Mammals in North America book out and trying to figure out what tracks were, which is very much similar to what you're doing there. It's just you're identifying something else out, right? So I used to like to take it out, and you would try and figure out, okay, that's probably a raccoon, or that's most likely a doe or a buck versus, you can find those little nuances, and that's kind of fun information. When you're just out with one of your buddies or something, you can look down and be like, oh yeah, that's a buck. It's probably so many years old, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh, that's really impressive. And you're like, I learned it in a book. It's just another one of those skills to get out there, have a little walk around, do some exploring while you're already exploring. And then it's a really neat party trick to kind of pull out of the back pocket. And I don't want to say impress people, but kind of impress them and have a little fun at the same time. You know what I mean?
The right person is impressed. The wrong person is like, oh yeah, or they won't even believe you. But that's cool. But no, there's so much to the whole tracking of like finding tracks and identifying. That's one piece. But as you get better, you can kind of identify the age of the track, how long that animal walked by. You start to realize how fast they're going, what their general health could be like. You said whether it's male or female. With people, believe it or not, you can even tell if they're left-handed or right-handed, usually by tracks. And surprisingly, that's not one of the hardest things to learn. Like, there's so much else you can learn.
And that's what I was just about to say. Surprisingly enough, it's not a difficult skill to learn, a very hard skill to master. Don't misunderstand this. But it's not a difficult skill just to pick up at a hobbyist level. You know what I mean? To where you can identify your most common creatures floating around, and then you realize, as Ben was saying, there's a lot of commonalities between tracks. The way they kick up, how much pressure's in the front versus the rear, spacing, stride, stuff like that, heavier on one side versus the other side. And after a while, once you figure it out, it's really not too difficult to pick out. And you can transfer it to any set of tracks, and therefore when you are out, if you still do the bushcrafting thing and you're just augmenting something to that, potentially if you're like looking for game in a survival situation, or you're just out there doing a little snare trapping, or you're hunting, these are all skills you can take back to that, which just, I guess at the end of the day, a lot of these skills marry into each other or complement each other, and that's just another one for the repertoire.
Yeah. Just trying to think what else I learned, because I did a tracking course a few years back, and it was a very interesting thing. And one of the things they really pushed on us was paying attention not just to the tracks, but the surrounding area and the history. So did it rain that morning? Has it rained in 2 or 3 days? Has it been sunny or overcast? All these things will affect how a track ages. And because you're interested in that, you're going to pay attention to other things. And that kind of helps. You're going to realize where tracks tend to form, why they form. I mean, there's so much you get out of this.
I mean, on a very basic level, one you can think of that is a lot of people just like to drive around in back roads. If you're coming up to a big puddle and it looks, murky, something could have been through there. Maybe it rained that morning and that accounts for it, or something's going through without that, too long ago. Or if you come up to it and it's crystal clear and you can clearly see that silty bottom, well, it probably hasn't been passed in a little while. And that's just a start. That's a real easy entry level in that you can do without ever leaving your vehicle.
For sure. And you brought up a very good point too. Like, vehicles have tracks. It's not something everyone thinks about, but one of the practices we had to do was they actually drove a vehicle in, turned it around, and left again. And we had to identify the tracks going in, the tracks going out, which direction each track was going, and how you tell that. And it's, the more and more you look at it, the more you learn to take in. So, it increases your overall awareness, which can never be a bad thing.
So Scott here from the comments, we've taken books out for the day where that was the goal for the day. Lunch and a short hike was the byproduct. And much like we're talking about, Scott, these are just reasons to get out there. So taking the books out to do some identification, the kickoff is maybe you got a lunch in the woods and you got a little hike out there.
Oh yeah. And that's, books are great. Apps are good. I love the books. I really do, especially if there's a few pictures in there to kind of look at things.
So I had to chuckle at Dave's comment here. He just popped it up in there, and I'm thinking, how Georgia is this? And I don't mean that in any bad way, just really. In South Georgia, the rangers tell everyone to assume every deep mud puddle has the potential to hold an alligator. And I'm thinking, what's more Georgia than that? You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I've been down in Florida the first time, not Georgia, but Florida, walking along, and I seen all these signs like, don't get close to the ditch. Basically, there could be an alligator in it. And I'm like, why would there be an alligator in the ditch? But it's realistic. I just,
Yeah.
it's culturally different. We don't have alligators here in Canada, for one. Uh, and two, when you see alligators on TV, they tend to glorify them quite a bit. And you're thinking of these great, big, monstrous animals. The reality is, it doesn't take a very big alligator to really put a hurting on you. And they move way quicker than you give them credit for, than what you see on TV. So,
Yeah.
good word
Okay.
of warning there. Always know the area and the wildlife around you.
Yeah. And I guess that's another thing too. Like I've always enjoyed seeing what animals I can see, and I don't do it this way, but you kind of think of like animal bingo, right? You go out and see how many animals can I see today? Can I see a deer? Can I see squirrels, rabbits, different types of birds, pheasants, you know, chickadees, blackbirds. I mean, there's so many animals out there, and some that you see fairly frequently, sometimes you see very rarely. Uh, and I kind of keep a running tally in my own head of animals I've seen this year and try to think, is there any that I normally see that I haven't seen? Or ones that I would really like to see because I know they're in the area, but I've rarely, if ever, seen them. So just to get out and see something different.
And funny enough, when you mentioned bingo there, that's an activity that Melissa has done with a lot of the preschool kids and stuff like that. And I think she set the activity up at the first Bushcraft gathering where she had just children's wilderness bingo. And it was, like seeing a beaver dam and seeing a pine tree. And at every one, she just gave a little snippet of information. And one of the ones I remember, because it helped her with it, was pine tree. Pine trees are fairly easy to identify with the other indigenous trees that we have here in Nova Scotia anyway. They got really long needles. But what's not as easy is some people can't distinguish a red pine from a white pine. And a real easy trick that I used to teach kids when I worked with natural resources at the education center and stuff like that was, well, how many needles does it have? And they'll either say 3 or 5, and I say, well, how many letters does red have? 3. Well, if it's 3 needles, it's red pine because it has 3 letters. Oh, how many is this? Oh, it's 5 needles. Well, how many letters does white have? It's a white pine, and it's a real neat thing that sticks in kids' heads that they take with them into adulthood because it's just one of those knacky things that sticks in your brain. And trying to come up with stuff like that for your kids, that's a lot of fun in its own. Like I do that with Willie. I've done it with my friends' kids. I've done it like literally doing it with Project Wet and Project Wild with natural resources. It's a ton of fun, that in its own. Just coming up with neat ways to pass that information on to your own children or friends' kids, or maybe you're doing a community day. It's just fun to do.
Oh yeah. Any activity that gets the kids really interested. It definitely does, and it makes it more fun for you.
Well, what did they say? Somebody's going to quote me on the right ones on this because I think I know them, but I don't. You learn 50% of what you read. You learn 70% of what you're shown, and you learn 85 to 90% of what you teach somebody else. Or remember, sorry. You remember 50% of what you read. You remember 50. Yeah. So anyway, but you remember, it's like, I'm going to say between 70 and 90% of what you teach somebody else. Because it forces you to think of it in a different way instead of, oh yeah, it's just there in my brain. It's like, how can I get this in somebody else's head? And
Yeah,
it tends to make it stick in your own head a lot better.
for sure.
So something else.
Unfortunately,
Oh, sorry.
if you teach long enough, it starts to fill up your brain.
Have you ever taught something so long you wonder if it's right anymore? Oh, good times there. Because if anybody doesn't know, I teach a motorcycle course locally too. And by the end of the summer, you'll have done the courses so long, you'll be like, is that right? And you start questioning yourselves and you know it by heart. You're on autopilot. And that's kind of what the problem is. You kind of realize you kicked into autopilot and you stop and you have to take a thought like, oh, okay, is that right? And usually is, don't get me wrong, but you've taught it so long it makes you question it.
Oh yeah.
And you learn 100% of what you learn from an accident. And that's a good point too, Dave. Sometimes learning what not to do is just as effective as what to do. Hopefully, there's no injury, no damage when that's involved, but it's still true nonetheless.
Well, I've heard it said you never fail. You just learn a method that doesn't work.
And that's the
Right.
way I like to look at everything too. But sometimes the method you learned is either damaging or painful.
So we mentioned tracks, we mentioned geocaches, we mentioned all these other things. Another thing to get out there that's really fun, if you're into this thing, is like geology, finding
Mm.
certain types of rocks and minerals and things like that. And I know people who do they look for gold. They do panning for gold.
Mm-hmm.
They prospect, I guess is the word I was looking for, and they learn so much. And if you talk to someone who prospects, they'll tell you a ton because they know that you don't find gold. You find things that gold is usually near or around. So they look for certain types of bends in the river because they know that that's liable to drop gold deposits. They look for quartz because gold is often found where quartz is found. They look for things that sort of lead to finding gold. And so you can find a ton of stuff. And there's different materials can be used for so much, like anything that's chert or flint, if you're into that sort of like flint knapping and stuff, or if you're into jewelry making and you're looking for amethyst or again, quartzes and different types of materials to make jewelry and stuff. It's a really fun thing.
And anybody that's interested in getting into that, you can look for the Department of, you know what? I don't know what their name is anymore since the government changed. But anyway, if you look for Department of Geology, I know New Glasgow used to have one down by the old train station. And you can go in and you can get geological maps that'll show you what the geological layers are for around your area. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to get you down to specifics like, oh, there should be 3 stones of quartz over here, but it'll give you a general idea of the geology in your area. So if you were into panning for gold and stuff like that, you can see where a lot of these veins may meet each other and make your own conclusions. And it's a good stepping stone to start. Geology was never one of my strong points, I openly admit, but I do know a lady I worked with on the fire crew. She was really big into panning for gold.
Yeah.
And that's where she started, and that was she had an upper leg on this because she started panning just outside the Moose River gold mine, so there was known gold deposits.
Yeah.
But I mean, still learned a ton of it, had a lot of fun doing it. I think she still does it to this day. And that's all she did was she got a couple geological maps, started learning. Well, she knew there was gold in that area because it was a gold mine, and just seeing what the commonalities were, and then tried to find other places with commonalities.
Yeah. Um, we're planning. Me and my daughter are actually planning on hitting a couple of spots this summer because she got into crystals and stuff. And I looked around, and there are some crystals and different minerals that you can find in Nova Scotia, and there's areas that are hot spots
Hmm.
where you can find a lot of it if you take your time to go. So I think that's actually going to be one of our goals. I want to camp near some of these areas so we can spend a day looking for these things. And then we're going to come back and we have a rock tumbler and we're going to tumble this and polish it. So, fun activity gets you out there.
Well, if you ever want to get a good quartz deposit, I can show you where one of the largest quartz deposits I've ever seen are. It's not far from where I'm at here. Oh yeah, I sent you a picture. Like
Yeah.
rocks that size, solid, good quartz, not uncommon at all.
So it's that's another thing. Another thing that a lot of people do to just get out and see something different is chasing waterfalls.
Don't go chasing waterfalls. Anyway, yeah, that was terrible. I know. Not going to quit my day job. Not going to give up podcasting and get into singing. But anyway, very true point.
Your phone? Yeah. So waterfalls, and there's a great map here in Nova Scotia. Like every now and then I find it, but it's a Google map, and it tells you where every known waterfall is in Nova Scotia. And there are people whose goal is to hit every waterfall in Nova Scotia. You're looking for it, aren't you?
No, if you just
Google it.
Yeah, if you Google waterfalls in Nova Scotia, it just comes up as a Google map. Yeah. And it has all the little ones marked off there. And funny enough, what I was trying to do was fact check something. But it's going to be a a little tricky to fact check. But anyway, I wanted to see if the information was public before I actually mentioned too much of it. But a little story. I'll leave off some names. There was a book before the website, which was literally Waterfalls in Nova Scotia. It was written by an individual and helped by another individual.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of working with the other individual. He was one of the last true forest rangers that I would consider we had in Nova Scotia. Really interesting man, real funny man, actually. Taught me a ton about being out in the woods. And he was nice enough to give me the original Garmin map points from when they made the book with all the waterfalls in Nova Scotia. So this would have been back in like the late 90s, real early 2000s when the book came out. And I still have that floating around here somewhere. It's in two parts. And that was really neat. And I compared it to the map of waterfalls in Nova Scotia, and most of them were there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it was real accurate, and he had the file, so I had no reason to dispute any of this factoids. But it was really neat that this individual had been to basically all these waterfalls in Nova Scotia, which is kind of achievement in itself. Because if you Google that and search it, it's not like you're looking for 6 or 7 waterfalls in Nova Scotia. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, and I mean, what's classified as a waterfall gets, can be fairly small to fairly significant. So, uh, I mean, I've seen a few. I haven't by any means seen them all, but I
Okay.
have seen a few.
I've seen some of the bigger ones in Nova Scotia because I tried to make a point of seeing some of the bigger ones. The one I showed you there, Sheepherder Junction, that's
Mm.
like the medium scale of waterfalls. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? If you get up to like Black Rock Falls and stuff like that, those are some really big ones. And there's a
yeah,
ton of nice ones out there. Some of them really easy to get to and really common swimming holes. So
yes. That's something I want to say. When you do look for waterfalls, oftentimes you find good swimming holes. So, especially in the summer, good way to cool off on a hot day. So,
and once again, that gives you that proverbial carrot on the end of the stick. If it's kind
yeah,
of a warmer day, everybody's, oh, we don't want to go outside, we want to stay in the air conditioning. Well, go look for a waterfall that has a good swimming hole that's not too far off the beaten path, and there's your trip for the day. If it's an hour walk in, you get there, you do some swimming, you cool off, you have a good time, you get to go for a walk, plus the exercise of the swim. You get to see some beautiful scenery because I've yet to see a waterfall that I'm like, yeah, that's ugly. You know what I mean? All waterfalls and most nature have its own beauty. So you get to see that. You have the swim, and then you can walk back out as the evening gets cooler. So I mean, it's as simple as that. Make a nice quick trip out into the woods.
so something else we can kind of cling on to this, I guess, is, and I know both of us have a bit of a passion in this, varying degrees, and we're always learning photography.
Hmm.
Um, get out there, get some pictures of the plants, pictures of the rocks, pictures of the waterfalls, pictures of the sunset, sunrise, the moon, uh, animals. I mean, and just, friends having fun.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that ever so slightly, you got yourself a couple new toys there, and even yeah, screw it, I'm gonna say it. Even like getting out there and playing with a new drone. That's something fantastic to get out there and stuff like that. And yes, Ben's gonna reach around and grab it. I wasn't gonna say specifically that you just got yourself a new drone, but Ben did actually get himself a new drone. He's been sending me some images, and I mean, some of them are absolutely stunning. Like you get angles that you never thought possible with a drone, and you actually get to be in your own photos when you take pictures with a drone, which is nice because normally if you take a picture with a camera or something like that, you're always on the wrong end of it. You know what I mean? Or you're awkwardly in the photo. With a drone, man, you have really sent me some stunning photos, and you have that opportunity where you can be in the stunning photo. You know what I mean? Which is an
Oh,
art in its own.
it is pretty cool. You can get some photos from angles that I think I've said it to you before. Like years ago, the only way you would ever get a photo like that might be like a ridiculously long stick and a lot of maneuvering, or getting someone like a helicopter or something. Like it wasn't a feasible thing for everyday person to get a photo of themselves from that
Mm.
position or angle. But now anyone can do it almost anywhere. They aren't out of the reach of say the average person. If that's their passion, if that's your passion to get one, you can buy one. I mean, yes, the prices can go up to a fairly expensive, but some of these are fairly reasonable. And the one I have doesn't require a special license or anything to fly, so it's a lot of fun. And I'm surprised where I'm allowed to fly. Like there are apps. Again, a lot of this stuff has apps. There's apps that'll tell you where you can fly and where you can't fly, and what precautions you need to take in each area. But itself, whether it's with the drone, with your point and shoot camera, with a DSL, or any combination thereof, there's a skill to taking good pictures, and taking that time to learn that skill and perfect it is definitely worth it, because photos are your memories. It stores things, and you can theoretically make money off photography and videography, but I think the bigger reward out of it is just having those pictures to share with friends and family and stuff. And that's a hard thing to beat. And it gives you that excuse to go that extra kilometer, or get up in a day when the weather didn't seem quite right, but not, you just want to go and catch that sunset that you would have otherwise missed, or catch that, sunrise that otherwise you might have missed, or catch that fish, in the morning. I'm saying this in case Gary's listening, because if he is, he gets up. He gets up in the morning before I do, catches a ridiculous sized fish, and then sends a picture to me.
And it's all in good fun, you know what I mean? Speaking of Gary, something he just said was Annapolis Valley had some great ones, waterfalls, but beware, my daughter and I came on one with an elderly couple skinny dipping. And I'm not gonna lie, I have been on the other end of this proverbial coin. I have been walked up on while I've been bathing. And no word of a lie, Melissa was with me. She can absolutely 100% attest to it. I was at the bottom of the waterfall having a morning shower, and two people walked out across the top of the waterfall. And I mean, you got nowhere to go. You're just, hey, how's it going, guys?
For those two people forever and ever.
They never stuck around. I mean, I legitimately was like, sorry folks, I'm way back here, just give me 2 seconds. And yeah, anyway, they just took off, never seen them again, so whatever. But I mean, it happens. I didn't expect anyone back there, but I guess that's the thing. If you're going to do stuff like that, you're not going to expect people back there. But yeah, Melissa still makes fun of me for that one on a regular basis, and that happened like 7-8 years ago now. Anyway, so yeah, I've definitely been on the other side of that. I found people at waterfalls. Haven't found any naked yet. I was the findee. I guess I was the one found.
1 in 4 people.
Yeah, well, but yeah. Anyway, any of these reasons to get out there and have a little fun, you may come along somebody having a bathing experience, but that's just a fun story later on. You know what I mean? I don't lie about it. But I laugh about it, and hopefully you can too, around situations and stuff like that. And if you're not into like any of this stuff, a good basic one is just straight up hiking. There is tons of hiking trails in Nova Scotia everywhere. They're pretty decent trails. There's parks with tons of hiking trails in it, and most of them will take you to see some real amazing scenery.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So those are just a few things, and by no means the end of things you can do that are not necessarily camping related, that get you out there, get you doing these things. I can probably think of a few more, but those are the highlight ones that I wanted to hit. Is there any that we missed that?
I hit all the ones I wanted to. Like geocaching was the big one I used to send most people into the woods that needed a reason to get in there. That always seemed to be the golden standard I came back to. Then once they started getting good at that and got their skills into the GPS, then I would send them chasing waterfalls. And that was always kind of my 2 go-tos. And hiking. Like anybody that's like, oh, I love to go in the woods, but I don't like being in the woods. You know what I mean? I tell them hit parks. And a good one for anybody that's in Nova Scotia that's really underappreciated and often overlooked is Taylorhead Park. They got some amazing trails there. And I'm a little biased. I helped maintain and put some of those trails in. But some real nice trails there. And quite a few of them. I think there's like 15 kilometers worth of trails or something out there. Like there's a full day's adventure out there if you want to have it. And you get to see some real nice stuff. One of the trails I think it's called Bull Beach Trail. It goes down along the beach. There's an old Celtic graveyard in there that you can take a look at. There's a couple look-offs. Then there's Spry Field. Anyway, there's a handful of trails out there, and they all have their own rewarding journeys on them, and they're not overly difficult, or you can pick a trail based on your experience, I guess I should say. There's everything from a nice groomed trail that just takes a little walk down along the beach to one where you're going to be like climbing up good hills and stairs and walking along cliffs and stuff like that. And if anybody has my private Facebook, you can go and check out pictures there from when I used to do the trails and stuff. And there's some real amazing sights there. And it was only a few years ago that I've gone back out and they're still there. And like I said, it's a very overlooked park because it is a little out there. It's in Sheet Harbor, but with amazing scenery. And then, of course, there's the big ones like, there's the Cape Breton trails and stuff like that, which is a lot more common for people to know because they are literally tourist destinations, and they're great too. Don't misunderstand. I went to Skyline Trail. I walked Skyline Trail for the first time in my life last summer. Seen it tons from the air. Never set a foot on it in my life until last summer. So
that's a good trail to hit too. I haven't hit that one in years. But yeah, no. Hiking has always been a big passion of mine too. I love getting out and seeing different spots and that. And honestly, like, you can walk and get your exercise in a mall. You can walk and get your exercise by walking around your own neighborhood. But that gets old pretty quick. Walking into a new area and seeing something new, like a new river or a new hill or a new sunset or a new beach or all these things that you haven't seen before, or if you have seen before, just revisiting them is great because it's just something different. And generally again, you kind of forget about it, but you end up walking up hills that you wouldn't have normally done, but it's a destination and you don't think about it. So you just keep going. So
just a couple comments here. Scott says that he wants to do an overnight metal detecting trip. Funny enough, I do own a metal detector. I've never done the whole metal detecting thing where you go out and actually look for stuff. I bought it to find arrows when I would lose them because I couldn't afford new arrows. And already I found a couple of my arrows. I found pressure sprayer nozzles with it that I lost in my yard. And my mother actually found her wedding ring. So, I mean, wow. The thing's paid for itself. Yeah. And it's actually kind of fun. And the one I got wasn't overly expensive. It wasn't high end, wasn't bottom end. It was like the low end of mid range. You know what I mean? Because I was just looking for something to literally find arrowheads. But, and Dave, we used to like to dress up in different camo and play hide and seek in the woods. The seeker would wear an orange vest. And I mean, we used to play a game when we were kids. We used to call it Manhunt. And we're really getting into Redneckville now because I can guarantee you these games would not be accepted by today's standards. But yeah, we would play Manhunt, and this is where you would flick apples at each other. Do you remember doing that as a kid? You put an apple on the end of a stick, and you could whiff that thing like 100 mile an hour.
Okay. We get a lot of apples where I grew up.
Okay, so maybe that was me in Redneckville. But anyway, yeah, you just put an apple on a stick, and oh man, it was a whole thing. You would pick out your stick. You had to get one that was just a little springy on the end because you could get a deadly snap, and it was a little bit more accurate. But anyway, Manhunt was some poor sucker was the one you were hunting, and everybody else got a stick with an apple. And yeah, like I said, by today's standards, nobody would accept these games anymore. They probably shouldn't have then. I take it to the beach, usually find enough to cover the tolls on the way. So, and that's the metal detecting. You know what? Every time I go to the local beach here, which is Melmurby Beach, I see lots of people out there with metal detectors. The beaches in your area, do you see a lot of metal detectors out?
I don't. But we bought one a few years ago for my daughter, and it wasn't a hit. It was cheaper than we had expected. And when I say cheaper than we expected, we brought it out. The output for the headphone jack, so you could put it in. The nut was actually misformed, so that fell apart, and there was a few things on it that just didn't seem to work. I think it was the fourth time we turned the on switch on, it actually turned on. Like a few things were finicky in it, and we decided to send it back, and it just wasn't quite what my daughter wanted. So we don't have one. I haven't seen a ton of people out, but I've watched a ton of videos, especially guys down the States to go to the beaches and go to like old abandoned properties and stuff and metal detecting. They find some amazing things.
I don't know anybody that's ever found like anything that's gotten them rich, but I know a couple people that have found, like you said, neat things.
Yeah.
Old knives, metals, just interesting stuff. Old money, like old coins and stuff. Like they find some really neat things. Have they gotten rich off it? Absolutely not. But you know what? They have some keepsakes that are really neat that not many other people would.
A buddy of mine years ago, he used to dive, and he used to like going to swimming holes. And you dive down to the bottom of swimming holes. He said you should come back with a few pieces of jewelry.
Yeah. A friend of mine, I say friend, acquaintance of mine, he likes to swim a river. In New Brunswick, there's this big thing where everybody tubes down a river. I'm sure you've heard of this tradition. Anyway, after everybody does their tubing, he used to like doing the diving through the river. And he has told me he has found cameras and cell phones and jewelry and watches and if he can find who owns them and return them, he does. Don't get me wrong, anybody out there. He is not just trying to scheme people's stuff. He legitimately sends this stuff back, but there's lots of stuff you're never going to find the owner to. He posts it, and after 2 weeks, he ends up with some cool things.
Yeah.
So.
No, have you seen the magnet fishing where you take a large magnet and drag it through a river?
I have. And I've seen some of the cool things people have drug out, and I've seen some of the real scary things people have drug out. And not too far from home, somebody doing magnet fishing in Halifax, and I won't give date or locations because I don't know if the individual wants the publicity or not, but they actually found a bunch of guns that somebody had dumped into the harbor or off a dock or something like that. They were fairly old, but anyway, he drug them up, called the police, they came and got them and found out they were linked to some sort of crime. So, I mean, they're neat story. You know what I mean?
That stuff happens, but yeah, it's pretty big. Watching it in a lot of the bigger centers and stuff, when people do what they come back with a lot of stuff, and some of it maybe has a legal history, but a lot of it is just stuff that people dropped, and it's a lot of it's just garbage, and you're just cleaning up.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. It doesn't seem like a hobby, but just cleaning up any garbage, just you get out and keep your area clean. It's something to do if you're just looking for something to do. And surprisingly, you can make a few bucks at it because pop bottles, cans, stuff like that, they all have a value. It's not, you're never going to get rich off it, I don't think. But you walk the side of a highway, you can probably pick up 10, 15 bucks in a run of a day if you want to really look. Because it doesn't take long.
It does not.
You can fill a minivan.
Yeah, it doesn't take long. It's amazing what people will toss out the window, which is bad all on its own. Don't get me wrong. There's no reason to litter. Stop at any gas station, there's a garbage can. You know what I mean? There's somebody down my road, and I hope you're listening to this, because if I ever see you, I am literally going to hire a dump truck to dump something in your yard. But it has to be the same person, because it's always in the same area and it's always the same crap. It's their McDonald's bag. Wait till you get home, put it in the trash, or wait, if you're going the other way, throw it in the trash bin. Like, there's no need to take your entire full bag of McDonald's crap and drill out the window. And this isn't a dig at McDonald's. That just happens to be what it is. You know what I mean? And there's just no need for it. Why? Why would you do that? We have to look at it driving by every day, and then somebody has to clean that up eventually.
That's where a trail cam comes in handy, buddy.
Oh, bud, you don't know how bad I've thought of it. And literally, if I can find out who this is, I will hire a dump truck to dump stuff on his lawn.
Trail cams are another fun activity. I don't own one, but I know quite a few people who do, and they get a great kick out of it. Go in the woods, find a spot where you would maybe want to go hunting or something, and just put it up. Even if you aren't really planning on hunting there, and it'd be surprising what animals you can see going around and stuff.
I was just reading a comment. Sorry, I was kind of half listening to you there, but it was Dave said several years ago a metal detector guy found what was reported to be Fernandad Dosto's sword. Ownership legalities lasted almost 4 years in the courts, and it's now in the Smithsonian Institute. So, I mean, yeah, some people really find some neat stuff. But yeah, trail cams. That's a fun pastime in its own. Of course, there is some legalities along with trail cams and stuff like that. Make sure that it's either on Crown land and not, recording the wrong things.
don't point them towards people's properties or things that you really shouldn't. Be somewhat respectful. People are out there not to be spied on. It's primarily used to find animals or protect your own personal property if you're looking for trespassers and stuff. But no, go out and find a good spot, maybe a small clearing in the middle of the woods where people wouldn't frequent. It's not, not a public area that people are going. It's just to see what animals you can see, because there's some neat animals out there, and there's some people who swear they've got pictures of animals that maybe aren't generally found in this area, and this is sometimes the proof that some animals are still around.
Every year hunting season, Natural Resources used to catch a flood of cougar photos.
Yeah.
Or suspected cougar photos. You know what I mean?
Moose is another one. People get pictures of moose in mainland Nova Scotia still on occasion, which means that they're not gone, but they're just very, very rare. Right?
I got a story about a mainland moose. I'm not going to tell it on the podcast, but I will tell you afterwards. Just remind me, because it's a good story.
But yeah, so those are some things you can add or subtract any of these things, but definitely reasons to get out. It is a lot of fun. It is great. And none of them involve like the overnight camping. None of them involve necessarily even a backpack.
Or they can if that's your thing.
Yeah, but they're all excuses to get out, and they're all really related to bushcrafting. It's things you can do while in the woods that add to that experience. So I hope some of you guys will think of some of these as ideas to get you out and get you exploring and learning and enjoying the outside. And if you try any of these things and have any experiences you'd love to share, we'd love to hear from you.
And as always, if you do want to get a hold of us, you can see it down there. That's all our social media stuff. Just reach out to us. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but yep, it's down there. Click something. Send us a message.
Anyways, good night all. See you next time.
Night, everybody. We'll see you next week.